we're going to be revisiting The Dark Knight Rises. The Dark Knight Rises came out in 2012, and that was a year a heck of a lot of superhero films came out. The very first Avengers film, then you had the amazingly average Spider-Man, you had Dredd, DC animated film The Dark Knight Returns Part 1, and then you had John Carter. The other day, I revisited The Dark Knight Rises. Actually, it's definitely my least favorite of the Nolan trilogy. On a lot of levels, it didn't fully deliver for me. And with the DC Extended Universe, I thought, tell you what, let's revisit The Dark Knight Rises. Let's see how that holds up compared to my feelings with the rest of the DC Extended Universe. So it did. You know, my thoughts are kind of the same and then have changed a little bit in other areas. I want to kind of talk about The Dark Knight Rises and the characters that Chris Nolan and co used. He picked 3 unique characters from the Batman mythology. They've picked really rich, deep characters who have impacted Batman on a serious and almost life-changing level, but have their on-screen interpretations been as good as their comic book interpretations. 3 interesting characters who've had huge impacts. So Bane's broken his back, Catwoman has been this friendly foe for decades. Then you have Talia, who is the daughter of one of Bruce's stroke Batman's arch enemies, and they end up having a kid together. So how do they weave these characters into a coherent plot? The Dark Knight Rises takes place around 7 or 8 years after The Dark Knight. Batman is gone, vanished. Bruce is a recluse, never see him apparently, and Gotham is doing okay. Elsewhere in the world, things are stirring. There's a character named Miranda Tate who is really interested in speaking with Bruce Wayne. She's known him for a while, and they were working on a project several years ago, but then suddenly it was mothballed. Because it was mothballed, Wayne Enterprises has pretty much lost most of its money. Miranda Tate, who really wants to speak to Bruce about this, special renewable energy device that they were working on. And then elsewhere you have Bane, who is a terrorist who is en route to Gotham because he wants to bring about Gotham's reckoning. Meanwhile, you have Catwoman, who is being hired to get information about Bruce. So they can start doing some stuff that is going to be quite damaging for Bruce, but also see the company drift into a different direction. The plot itself is quite multifaceted. This kind of grand terrorist scheme, there is this kind of corporate merging takeover plot, but then you also have the Bruce story, which is kind of the rising from the ashes. Eventually learn that Miranda Tate is actually Talia al Ghul, and the whole reason that she's, playing Batman and literally loads of different people is so that she can fulfill her father's dream of destroying Gotham. It's a plot that's virtually identical to Batman Begins. When I walked out of the cinema, I really felt it just didn't deliver for me. I've seen this before. I really wanted to see something different. So I think The Dark Knight Rises struggled with villain overload. Films starting from kind of Spider-Man 3 and X-Men 3. We need to throw in all these villains, and that really happened here. Realistically, Catwoman could be ejected out of the film and it wouldn't change the plot at all. I mean, she's literally just there to open the door to Bane. Bruce could have just done some detective work to find where Bane was. By the end of the film, when you learn Bane's connection to Talia, you're kind of like, oh, Bane, just been reduced to the muscle. So I thought that was really disappointing for Bane as a character, given the immense performance that Tom Hardy gave.
Your punishment must be more severe.
Wasn't overly keen on the 6-month kind of standoff in Gotham, and then Batman comes and saves the day when there's like less than 24 hours till the bomb goes off. This standoff goes for half a year. The policemen are stuck down underground for half a year. At the beginning of the film, Bruce's leg injury, which he sustained in the fall from The Dark Knight, why didn't he get that fixed? It just made the story go a lot slower than what it really should have done. He's Bruce Wayne. He's all the time going off and doing things. If he comes to the doctor with a broken, leg injury or some sort of leg injury, no one's going to suspect that, oh, you must be Batman. Another thing that did pull me out of the film was the fact that they used New York City as their backdrop. Batman Begins and The Dark Knight was predominantly shot in Chicago, and then this one was done in New York, and it really, really felt like New York. It didn't feel like I was seeing Gotham. It kind of pulled me out. I felt like I was actually seeing New York. And at the end of the day, it's just not a Batman film. It's a police film. But, as I said, I have gone back and I've rewatched it and have changed my thoughts a little bit. Pretty much everything I've already said, I still feel. I think they could have done something a little bit sharper. But there are some things that worked. I think first and foremost, you have characters that you understand. Their motivation, whether I like it or not, is clear, it makes sense. So the motivation of all the characters in the film is absolutely solid. There is progression for established characters. Alfred, Bruce, Gordon, they all have a progression. Even new characters like John Blake. You know, structurally, it's not a completely watertight plot, but it is a well-structured plot. You know, as like I said in my original review, I really felt like I was watching a film based on the Gotham City Police Department. And that's really what it is. It's a police procedural and not really a Batman film. And when I step out of the film and I don't view it as a Batman film, and I view it as this big kind of police drama film with a crazy terrorist type plot, I'm like, oh, you know, I'm actually enjoying this more when I take the comic book element out of it. Was that something that, you know, a Batman film by Chris Nolan got right? You might be asking me because that sounds contradictory to all my negative things. It's actually because that story that they wanted to tell, they didn't want to tell a Batman heavy story. It's more of a human story about these human characters in this unbelievable situation and how they get out of it, as opposed to you have a man dressed up like a bat with all these gadgets and toys. It's about, you know, being broken and defeated, and how do you come back from that. When you remove the Batman aspect, you're really left with a quite decent action thriller. In light of that, when I compare it to the current DC cinematic universe, I'm like, this film that I thought was shit a few years ago is actually a freaking masterpiece. You know, what you have is a film that knows what story it wants to tell, it knows the tone that it wants to go for, and it knows where it wants to take the characters. Ironically, it's something that the DC Cinematic Universe should learn from, because, you know, everyone's like, oh, Nolan consulted on Man of Steel, that's why it's amazing. It's not amazing. Ben Affleck is the best portrayal and most honest portrayal of Batman that we've ever had. No, he was just the only character that was somewhat likable in a 2.5 hour boring, stale film about mopey Superman. People think that Batman Begins, The Dark Knight, The Dark Knight Rises are successful because there's this dark tone. That's not why. It's not successful because it's dark and gritty, or because of its realism. Those aren't the reasons that make it successful. They're interesting aspects to incorporate into a comic book film, that I will give you, but it's not why it's successful. It's successful because whether I've liked the plots or not, the scripts themselves, the stories, the narratives are well written, they're well structured, and thought out. You know, they're films that aren't, you know, racing to catch up with some other studio. They're not films that are trying to compete with anything else. They're just trying to be solid films in and of themselves. So now, after all these years of not liking The Dark Knight Rises, and pretty much, you know, this last time that I watched it is literally the third time that I've seen the film. I saw it once in cinema, I watched it one other time with some friends, and then this time. You know, so I've only seen this film 3 times. The first 2 times, I was just frustrated with it because it just didn't give me what I wanted. But as I step back and look at the wider DC Cinematic Universe, and I look at what the film actually did deliver, you know, it didn't deliver a Batman film, it delivered a Gotham Police Department film, which is fine. You know, that's obviously, like I said, that's what they wanted to do. The main thing that I've taken away from that is these other DC films are trying so hard to be this dark, gritty, realistic thing, and they're missing that key component, and that key component is narrative. Have a good story. So tell me what you think. Am I right? Am I wrong? You know, I might be completely wrong according to you. According to me, I'm right. You know, honestly, comment below, let me know what you think. You know, do you think there are other elements from the Dark Knight trilogy that could be incorporated to help improve the DC Cinematic Universe? Yeah, let me know what your thoughts are below, and in the meantime, I'm gonna go read this.